The stars above Rixus were bright and clear, stretching across the dark expanse of space. Princess Zora sat in her private chamber, deep in thought. As the heir to the throne of Rixus, she had been trained in many things: battle tactics, politics, and the ancient traditions of her people.
Ow.
But none of that had ever satisfied her curiosity about humans. There was something about them that fascinated her. Their strength, their resilience, and the mysteries that surrounded them always intrigued her. Zora had always believed that if she could understand them better, she could strengthen her people. The Rix's empire had conquered many worlds, but the humans were different. They had avoided the empire's expansion for years. Zora wanted to learn more about them, to understand their secrets. So, she came up with a secret plan that could change everything. She had access to the best scientists in the galaxy. They had developed advanced cloning technology, and Zora had an idea. If she could create a human clone, she could study it, learn what made humans so special, and perhaps even unlock the secret to their strength. But there was one thing she didn't account for. She had never expected the clone to come to life the way it did. It was late one evening when Zora decided to act. She had ordered the best team of scientists to begin the experiment in a secret lab deep beneath the palace. The subject was already chosen, a man named Ethan. He was an explorer. From Earth, the only human she had encountered who seemed to carry an unusual presence. His body was strong, but it was his spirit, his determination. That caught her attention. Zora watched as Ethan was brought into the lab. He was unconscious, having been taken from his home on Earth without warning. The scientists had prepared everything, and Zora gave the final order. The process began. Ethan's body lay on a sterile table, and the cloning technology began its work. Zora stood in the background, her mind racing with thoughts of what would happen next. She had never fully understood the cloning process, but she believed it would be simple enough. All she had to do was ensure that Ethan's DNA was properly replicated, but things did not go according to plan. As the process continued, something unexpected happened. A strange energy wave surged through the laboratory, causing the cloning machinery to malfunction. The scientists scrambled to control it, but the damage was done. Instead of creating an exact copy of Ethan, the process had fused Zora's own DNA with his. The machine whirred and hummed as it processed the new genetic material. When it finally stopped, Zora stepped forward, her heart pounding. She couldn't believe her eyes. The clone was no longer just a copy of Ethan. It was something entirely different, a mixture of Zora's and Ethan's DNA. A human with the strength and power of both species. The clone's eyes opened slowly, and for the first time Zora saw them human eyes, but with a strange, almost glowing quality to them. The clone looked around the room, his gaze landing on Zora. He was confused, disoriented, but there was something in his eyes that seemed familiar. His confusion faded quickly, and he spoke in a voice that was both strong and uncertain. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice echoing in the sterile room. Zora hesitated, her heart racing. This was not what she had expected. She had created a clone, but not like this. This was something new, something beyond her understanding. She wasn't sure what to do next, but one thing was clear. She was no longer in control of the situation. The clone was alive, and he was looking at her as if he knew her, as if there was something between them. "You are on the planet Rixus," Zora said carefully, trying to sound calm. "You were brought here for an experiment, but things didn't go as planned." The clone sat up slowly, his muscles tense as he tested his strength. He seemed to be adjusting quickly, as if his body already knew what to do. Zora watched him closely, her mind racing with questions. What had she done? This was no ordinary clone. This was something far more powerful and far more dangerous. The clone turned his gaze back to Zora, his expression softening as he took in her appearance. "You're not human," he said, his voice calm, but filled with curiosity. Zora nodded, still unsure of how to respond. "I'm Princess Zora of the Rix's Empire. I created you. Or at least I meant to. But the experiment went wrong." Clone seemed to be thinking. His eyes narrowed as he processed the information. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice steady. There was no fear in his words, only the kind of calm determination that Zora had never seen in anyone before, not even in her own people. "I wanted to understand humans," Zora admitted. "I wanted to learn more about your kind. I thought a clone would be the answer, but now, ... She hesitated, unsure of how to explain the situation. "Now I don't know what you are." The clone stood up, his movements graceful and sure. "You don't know me, but I feel like I know you," he said. There was a quiet intensity in his voice, and Zora felt a strange pull toward him, a connection she couldn't explain. It was as if their fates were tied together in a way she never could have imagined. Zora stepped back, her mind reeling. This was no longer about science. This was about something much bigger. The clone wasn't just a product of an experiment. He was someone real, someone she would have to deal with. And as she looked into his eyes, she realized that this could change everything for both of them. Before she could say anything more, the clone took a step closer to her. "What now?" he asked. Zora swallowed hard, trying to gather her thoughts. I don't know," she said softly, "but we'll figure it out together." In that moment, Zora knew that nothing would ever be the same. Her empire, her life, and everything she had believed in was about to be challenged by the one thing she never expected: a human who was not just a clone, but something more. And as the clone stood before her, she couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. What would this new creation mean for her and her people, and what did it mean for the galaxy at large? The adventure was just beginning. The days following the strange creation of the hybrid clone were filled with confusion and uncertainty. Princess Zora found herself waking up in her palace chambers, her thoughts tangled and her heart racing with questions. She had always been in control of her life, but now the clonathon had turned everything upside down. Zora had hoped that her plan to understand humans would give her strength. She had wanted to learn their secrets, to find ways to make her people stronger. But what she hadn't expected was the emotional pull that Ethan had on her. Every time she looked at him, her heart fluttered in a way she couldn't explain. She had never allowed herself to feel this way about anyone. It's not about her people, not about her empire. Yet with Ethan, everything felt different. Zora stood in front of the mirror, her royal gown flowing down her body, but her mind was far from her reflection. The image staring back at her felt distant, as if she no longer recognized the woman in the glass. She wasn't sure if it was the clone that had changed her, or something deeper inside her that was awakening. She had to make a decision. The Rixus Empire was not a place where weakness was tolerated. A leader needed to be strong, detached, and in control. But how could she be those things with Ethan by her side? It wasn't just a human. He was a part of her now. Their shared bond was undeniable, and that scared her more than anything else. Zora turned away from the mirror, her thoughts clouded with worry. She needed to meet with her advisors. The tension had been growing in the palace ever since the birth of the hybrid child. The nobles had been whispering about her actions, calling her weakness and failure. The royal family demanded answers, and she had none to give. In the grand hall of the palace, her advisors awaited her. The room was filled with the sound of hushed voices, and the weight of the situation hung in the air like a storm ready to break. As Zora entered, she could feel the eyes of the room on her. Her presence, once commanding and unquestioned, now felt fragile and uncertain. Princess, one of her advisors, a tall alien named Varth, spoke first. His voice was cold, his eyes sharp. "This situation cannot be allowed to continue. You've broken the laws of our people by creating a hybrid. The throne, our very survival, could be at risk." Zora's heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral. "The child is not a threat. He is part of a new beginning. It's a chance for our people to grow beyond our old ways." Varth scoffed. "You speak of a new beginning, but the truth is the Empire will not accept this. The hybrid child is a symbol of weakness. It is an abomination. You must end this now." Zora's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She had heard these words before, but hearing them now, from those she had trusted, was like a dagger to her heart. Her people valued power, purity, and tradition above all else. A hybrid half-human, a Phrixus, was something they could never accept. The thought of sending Ethan away, of ending what they had begun, felt impossible. "I will not abandon my child," Zora said firmly, her voice carrying strength, although her insides trembled. "I will not bow to tradition if it means destroying a future." Another advisor, a woman named Talia, spoke up. "And what of Ethan? What do you plan to do with him? He is a human, a mere experiment. You cannot expect him to be part of our royal lineage." Zora's gaze shifted toward the door, where Ethan stood just beyond the threshold, listening to their conversation. He had been silent for hours, ever since Zora had ordered him to stay back and not interfere, but he hadn't left. He never did. "I will figure out what to do with him," Zora said, though the words felt hollow. "But he's not just an experiment. He is part of me now. I will not abandon him any more than I would abandon my own blood." Ethan stepped into the room, his presence like a breath of fresh air in the tense space. He stood tall, his human features striking against the alien grandeur of the palace. His eyes locked with Zora's, and for a moment, the world seemed to fade away. There was only the two of them. Zora could feel the tension in the room shift, as if her people were finally beginning to understand the gravity of the situation. She wasn't just fighting for the future of her child. She was fighting for the future of her relationship with Ethan, a man from a faraway planet who had unexpectedly become so much more than just a clone. "I'm not a weapon." Ethan spoke, his voice clear and confident. "I didn't ask for any of this, but I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere." Zora felt a small sense of relief as she watched the reactions of the others. Some of them seemed shocked by his words. Others exchanged doubtful glances. She saw something else, something, in the way they looked at Ethan. There was fear of the unknown, fear of what a hybrid could mean for their way of life. "The Empire doesn't need to be afraid of me," Ethan continued. "I'm not here to take over. I just want to help Zora. I want to help her, and our child, whatever that means." Zora felt her heart soften. She had never heard Ethan speak so openly, so courageously. It was as if the bond between them had grown stronger overnight, as if the child they shared had already begun to weave them together in ways she had never imagined. Talia shook her head. "You cannot think you will simply carry on as though nothing has changed. The Empire will never accept this. Your actions have already set the wheels of rebellion into motion." Yes. Zora felt a coldness settle in her chest. The rebellion was real. She knew that her enemies were already plotting against her, but she also knew that turning her back on Ethan would be more dangerous than anything else. Her people may not understand this union, but the galaxy was changing, and Zora had to change with it. "I won't let this empire tear us apart," Zora said, her voice quiet but resolute. "I will lead, no matter what it costs me, and I will protect my family." The room was silent for a moment, and Zora could feel the weight of her words hanging in the air. Her people had never faced anything like this before. They had never seen their princess so determined, so unwilling to bend. As Zora looked back at Ethan, she realized that she was no longer the person she had been when she first started this journey. She wasn't just fighting for the throne anymore. She was fighting for the family she was building, for the future she had never expected to have, and she would do whatever it took to protect it. The tension within the palace was now undeniable. Every room seemed filled with whispers. Every hallway echoed with doubt. The creation of the hybrid child had shaken the very foundation of the Rixus Empire. Princess Zora had never imagined that her decision to create a human clone would lead to this. The rebellion was not just a rumor anymore. It was real, and it was growing stronger by the day. Zora paced her private chambers, her thoughts racing. The words of her advisors still echoed in her mind. They had warned her that the hybrid child would not be accepted, that it would cause unrest. But what hurt the most was the growing divide within her own people, her family, the royal court. The very people she had once trusted now saw her as a threat to their way of life, a threat that needed to be removed. She turned toward the window, staring out at the city below. The grand streets of Rixus had always been full of life and power, but now they felt distant, like a place she could no longer claim as her own. Her people were afraid. Fear had always been the greatest tool for control, and now fear was controlling them. "Zora," a voice broke her thoughts. It was Ethan, standing at the doorway. His presence had become a comfort in these dark times, though she knew he too felt the weight of the situation. "Are you all right?" Zora smiled weakly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine. Just thinking. Ethan stepped into the room, his eyes full of concern. He had grown stronger since the day he had first awakened. His human form was imposing, and his presence was undeniable. Yet, it wasn't his strength that Zora felt drawn to. It was his calm determination, his unwavering loyalty that made her feel less alone in this struggle. "Don't hide your thoughts from me, Zora," Ethan said softly. "You're carrying the future of your people and ours. You're not alone in this." Zora turned to face him fully. "But I am alone," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Now my own people are turning against me. The resistance is growing, and the child," she trailed off, the weight of her words too much to bear. Ethan moved closer to her, his hand reaching out to gently take hers. "You're not alone. I'll fight beside you, and I won't let them tear your family apart." Zora felt a wave of relief wash over her. Ethan had always been strong for her, and now, more than ever, she needed him by her side. But the truth was, she didn't know how to fight against the fear and anger that had already taken root in the hearts of her people. "They want to take the throne from me," Zora said, her voice steady now. "The resistance will stop at nothing to make sure the hybrid child is seen as a mistake. They believe he will weaken us, and because of his existence, they think I'm unfit to lead." Ethan squeezed her hand, his eyes filled with unwavering support. "They're wrong. The child represents a new beginning, not weakness. If your people can't see that, it's their problem, not yours." Zora closed her eyes, the words sinking in. Ethan was right. The hybrid child wasn't a symbol of weakness. He was a symbol of change, of unity. It was proof that the Rixus Empire could evolve beyond its old ways. And yet, she couldn't ignore the reality she faced. The Empire had been built on a foundation of tradition, and tradition could not be easily broken. "I need to act fast," Zora said, her eyes opening with renewed determination. "The longer I wait, the stronger the resistance will grow. I need to find allies, people who understand that change is necessary. I can't do this alone." Ethan nodded. "I'm here for you. Together we can find a way to turn this around. Let's make sure that your people see the truth about the future." Zora stood tall, feeling a surge of confidence. For the first time since the birth of the hybrid child, she felt like she might have a chance. But the road ahead would not be easy. The resistance was already well organized, and there were factions within her own court who were just waiting for the right moment to strike. The following days were filled with strategic meetings and quiet conversations behind closed doors. Zora knew she had to be careful. Her enemies were everywhere, some of them disguised as allies, some of them disguised as loyal servants. The line between friend and foe had blurred, and the fear of betrayal weighed heavily on her shoulders. But Zora wasn't ready to give up. She wasn't ready to back down from what she believed in. She began to quietly reach out to those she knew could be trusted. People who shared her vision of a united future for the Rixus Empire. It wasn't easy, and every alliance was fragile. But there were those who, like Zora, believed that the hybrid child could bring about a new era, a better future for all. And slowly, those voices began to rise above the whispers of fear. Evening, Zora met with a small group of influential allies in a hidden chamber deep within the palace. Among them were her most trusted generals and a few senators who still believed in her vision. They were few, but they were loyal, and they were ready to fight. "The time has come," Zora said, her voice steady and commanding. "We must stand. Together, the resistance will only grow stronger if we don't act. I need you to help me protect my family and the future of this empire." The room fell silent, and one of her generals, a large alien with a scar across his face, spoke up. "Your Highness, we stand with you. People may be afraid, but we are not. The future you seek is worth fighting for." Zora felt a surge of hope. It wasn't much, but it was a start. With these few allies, she could begin to push back against the forces that sought to tear her empire apart. She couldn't change everything overnight, but she could start. And in doing so, she could show her people that change was not something to fear, but something to embrace. "We fight for the child," Zora said, her voice strong now, "and for the future of the Rix's empire. We will not be swayed by fear or tradition. We will stand united. The room erupted in a quiet but powerful chorus of agreement. Zora knew the path ahead would be difficult. But with Ethan by her side, and with these brave few willing to stand with her, she was ready to face whatever came next. The days had grown colder as the tension in the palace reached new heights. Princess Zora knew that time was running out. The resistance against her had grown stronger, and with each passing hour, the chances of losing everything, her throne, her future, and her family, seemed to grow larger. Yet, despite the growing danger, she couldn't focus on anything other than the child growing inside her. She had spent countless hours thinking about the future, about the child, and about what it would mean for the galaxy. The hybrid child was not just the product of an experiment gone wrong, it was the symbol of everything Zora had hoped for: a new beginning, a chance to bridge the divide between her people and humans. Ethan, who had become so much more than just a clone, was by her side every step of the way. Their bond had only deepened over time, and he had proven to be her constant source of strength. Together, they faced the growing pressure from Zora's court, the ever-looming threats from the rebels, and the uncertainty of their child's future. The time had come. Zora felt the first pangs of labor early one morning. She was sitting in her private chamber, looking out over the palace gardens, when the sharp pain hit her. It was not the kind of pain she had expected. It was much more intense. At first, she tried to ignore it, thinking it was just another moment of discomfort. But then the pain came again, stronger this time. Ethan. Zora's voice trembled as she stood, clutching her stomach. She could feel something was happening, something she had been both dreading and anticipating. Ethan was by her side almost instantly, his hands gently taking hold of her. His eyes were wide with concern, but there was no fear in them. "Zora, are you all right?" I don't know," she whispered, her breath shallow as another wave of pain struck. "It's time. The baby. It's coming." Zora had been prepared for this moment, but she hadn't expected it to come so suddenly. Her mind raced, but all she could focus on was the overwhelming sensation coursing through her body. She had never felt anything like it before, and despite all the medical technology available to her, there was still a sense of uncertainty. "Don't worry," Ethan said, his voice firm and soothing. "We'll get through this together. Just breathe." Zora nodded, taking in deep breaths as the pain continued to come in waves. She could feel her strength fading, but there was a fire inside her that refused to go out. She was the princess of Rixus. This child, this symbol of unity, was worth any challenge. Minutes felt like hours as Ethan supported her, leading her to the medical chamber where the royal healers awaited. They had prepared for this moment, but even they looked nervous. Zora could sense their doubt, but it didn't matter. This child would be born, and no one could stop it. The chamber was cold, sterile, and filled with the soft hum of the machines that would assist in the birth. Zora was placed on a table, her body trembling as she tried to gather her strength. Ethan stood by her side, never once leaving her. "You're doing great," he said. Squeezing her hand, Zora's grip tightened around his, and she took another deep breath. "I never imagined it would be like this. It's a pain. It's nothing like I expected." "You're stronger than you think," Ethan said, smiling softly. "And so is the baby." Zora couldn't help but smile back at him, though the pain was still overwhelming. She knew he was right. She was stronger than any of the royal bloodlines. This child, their child, was proof of that strength. Hours passed in a blur of pain and sweat, but Zora never gave up. The healers worked, quickly guiding her through each wave of pain. Ethan stayed with her, holding her hand, whispering words of encouragement, never letting her feel alone. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the room was filled with the sound of a baby's cry. Zora's heart skipped a beat as the healers placed the newborn child in her arms. She looked down at the small, wriggling bundle, her heart swelling with love. The child was perfect, his tiny hands grasped onto her fingers, and his eyes, though still unfocused, were wide and alert. Tears welled up in Zora's eyes as she held the child close, her heart filled with a mix of joy and fear. This was the moment she had longed for. This was the beginning of something new, something different. Ethan moved closer, his eyes soft as he gazed down at the child. "He's beautiful," he whispered. Zora looked up at him, her heart full of love. "He's ours," she said. Her voice choked with emotion. As she held the baby, she felt a sense of peace she had never known before. The resistance, the rebellion, the challenges ahead, all of that seemed distant now. For the first time in a long time, Zora felt that everything would be okay. This child was proof that the future was not something to fear, but something to embrace. But just as the peaceful moment settled over the room, a knock at the door shattered the silence. Zora's head snapped toward the door, her heart racing. "What is it?" she demanded, her voice still raw from the birth. One of the palace guards stepped into the room, his face grim. "Your Highness, there's news." From the resistance, Zora's heart sank. She knew what was coming. The resistance would not sit idly by while she held her child. They would try to use this moment of vulnerability to tear her down, to take what she had built. Ethan stepped forward, his expression hardening. "Tell them we will not back down," he said, his voice filled with determination. Zora nodded, holding her child close. She was a mother now, but she was also a princess. Her fight was far from over. "Send them my message," Zora said, her voice strong once more. "The Rix's empire will not bow to fear. Not now, not ever." As the door closed behind the guard, Zora looked down at her child. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. She would do anything to protect her family. No matter what came next, she was ready. The palace had never felt so cold, even though the warm sunlight flooded the halls of the royal wing. Princess Zora sat in her chambers, her eyes fixed on the small bundle in her arms. Her baby, the hybrid child, slept peacefully, unaware of the turmoil that was closing in around them. Zora's heart was full, but it also carried the weight of everything she had fought for. The child was a symbol of hope, of change. Yet, in the eyes of many in her empire, he was a threat and abomination that needed to be destroyed. The resistance, led by her own bloodline, had grown stronger. The whispers of betrayal filled every corner of the palace, and the rebels were getting bolder. "Zora." Ethan's voice interrupted her thoughts, drawing her back to the present. He stood in the doorway, his face full of concern. "It's time." She nodded slowly, looking down at their son one last time before handing him to the nursemaid. "Take him to the safe room," she whispered. "Keep him hidden until I return." The nursemaid nodded and gently took the child, leaving the room in a hurry. Zora knew the child's safety was paramount, but there was something else she needed to do, something that couldn't wait. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "Are you sure about this? You don't have to face them alone?" Zora turned to face him. "I'm not alone. You're with me. That this fight is mine to finish. If I don't stand up for my son, for our future, then who will?" Ethan didn't argue. He simply nodded, understanding the strength that burned in her. Together, they had already faced the impossible. But now they were going to face the heart of the empire itself, the people who would stop at nothing to tear Zora down, the royal throne room. Once a symbol of power and tradition, now felt like a battlefield. The grand hall was filled with nobles, generals, and senators, all of them watching with bated breath as Zora entered. Her posture tall and unwavering. She could feel the eyes of her enemies on her, their judgment, their hatred, her uncle general. Kale stood at the front, his arms crossed, his face twisted with disdain. He had been the leader of the resistance for weeks now, using his position in the royal army to gather support against her. The moment Zora had given birth to the hybrid child, he had begun to rally the most powerful families of the empire to his cause. Now they were all gathered here, prepared to take what they believed was rightfully theirs. "You have failed," Zora General Kale's voice boomed as she approached the center of the room. "You have dishonored our bloodline with this creature." He sneered at her son, who was hidden in the safe room, far from sight. Zora stood tall, her chin lifted in defiance. You can call him whatever you want, Kale, but he's my son. And he is the future of this empire. You are the one who has failed. The room fell silent at her words. The generals, the nobles, even her own allies exchanged uneasy glances. The tension was palpable, as if the entire empire were holding its breath. Kale took a step forward, his voice laced with venom. Shh! You are weak, Zora. This child, this abomination, will destroy everything we've built. It will divide us, break us, and make us vulnerable to enemies who will seek to use this weakness against us. Zora's eyes hardened. You're wrong, she said, her voice steady, but filled with a quiet rage. The strength of an empire does not lie in its ability to stay. The same it lies in its ability to change, to adapt. You want to preserve the old ways, but those ways have failed us. We need to move forward, together. You speak of change, but it is your very bloodline that you threaten. The child is a symbol of that threat, Kale spat. You are no longer fit to rule. I am the rightful heir, and I will take what is mine. The room erupted in whispers, but Zora did not flinch. She had already made up her mind. This would be the moment that defined her, the moment when she proved that she was not just a princess, but a leader. She would fight for the future, for her son, and for the empire she dreamed of. I will not let you destroy what we could build, Zora said, her voice filled with conviction. If you think you can tear this empire apart by force, you are mistaken. I will stand against you, Kale, and I will not back down. Ethan stepped forward, standing beside her. His presence alone sent a clear message to the room. We stand. Together, he said firmly, and we will protect what is ours. For a moment, there was silence. It was as if the entire empire was waiting for something to happen. But then, Kale let out a low, mocking laugh. You think you can defeat me? You, a woman, and a human child? Zora stepped forward, her voice carrying across the room. Not about what you think, it's about what we know. What we know is this. We are stronger than you ever imagined. We will not let fear rule us. We will lead this empire into a new future, one where we embrace change, not fear it. Kale's eyes narrowed. He raised his hand, signaling to the rebels hidden in the crowd. Zora's heart raced as she saw them move, their weapons drawn, ready to strike. But Zora wasn't afraid. She had prepared for this moment. She wasn't alone. She had Ethan, and she had her loyal supporters. The generals and senators who believed in her cause had already pledged their loyalty. It was time to show them that the empire could be united if they were willing to stand with her. I've had enough of your lies, Kale, Zora said, her voice unwavering. If you want to fight, then fight. But know this, the future is no longer in your hands. It is in mine. The room exploded into chaos as the rebels moved to strike, but Zora's forces were ready. The battle for the throne had begun. Zora and Ethan stood side by side, prepared to face whatever came next. The fight for the empire would not be easy, but it was one they had to win. For their son. For the future. The war for the throne was just beginning, and Zora would fight until the very end. The battle for the throne raged on. Zora had never imagined it would come to this. She had always known that her rule would be tested, but the resistance had proven more powerful than she had anticipated. The palace walls, once a symbol of her strength and authority, were now filled with the sounds of clashing metal and shouted commands. Zora's heart pounded in her chest as she stood in the center of the war room, surrounded by her most trusted allies. Ethan was by her side, his expression grim, but determined. The weight of their responsibility hung heavy. There was no turning back now. We've lost control of the eastern wing, one of her generals reported, his face flushed with exhaustion. The rebels are pushing forward. Zora nodded, her mind racing with options. They had prepared for this moment, but nothing could truly prepare them for the scale of the rebellion. Kale's forces were well organized, and they had the support of many powerful families within the empire. But Zora had one thing Kale did not, her unyielding belief in the future they could build together. Hold the line, Zora said, her voice steady. We can't let them take the throne room. Protect the child and make sure the safe room remains secure. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We'll hold them off. You fought harder than anyone to get to. This point, we can't give up now. Zora looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. He had become more than just a partner in this fight. He had become her strength, her rock. She knew she couldn't have made it this far without him. And yet she also knew that the road ahead would require more than just their combined efforts. They needed to unite the people, to show them that change was the only way forward. The battle outside the war room continued, and Zora's thoughts drifted briefly to their son. He was safe for now. But the thought of him growing up in a world so divided made her heart ache. She wanted more for him. She wanted him to grow up in a world that embraced change, not one that feared it. We need to end this, Zora said. Quietly, her mind made up. We can't wait any longer. The longer we fight, the more the Empire will crumble. It's time to make a stand. Ethan nodded, his gaze intense. What do you have in mind? Zora took a deep breath, her mind already working through the plan. We need to take control of the communications tower. If we can broadcast a message to the entire Empire, we can show them the truth. They need to see what Kale is really trying to do. He's not fighting for the people, he's fighting for power. And he's willing to destroy everything to get it. Ethan's expression softened. You think they'll listen? Zora's gaze hardened. They have to. This empire was built on the idea that it would protect its people. Kale's rebellion is a lie. I will show them the truth. Ow. The plan was risky, but Zora knew it was the only way. If they could take control of the communications tower, they could reach the hearts and minds of the people. It was their only chance to end the fighting. To unite the empire once more, without wasting another moment. Zora and Ethan gathered their most trusted generals and set out toward the communications tower. The palace had been torn apart by the ongoing battle, but they pushed forward, their determination unwavering as they made their way through the halls. Zora couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. The clock was ticking. Kale's forces were closing in, and the future of the Empire rested on their shoulders. They reached the tower, but it wasn't unguarded. A group of rebel soldiers stood at the entrance, blocking their path. Zora's heart pounded in her chest as she assessed the situation. There was no turning back now. Stay behind me, Ethan said, stepping forward. We'll take them out quickly. Zora didn't hesitate. She had fought alongside Ethan long enough to trust his instincts. Together, they were unstoppable. The rebels were skilled, but they were no match for the combined strength of Zora and Ethan. In moments, the group of rebels had been neutralized, and they moved into the tower. Inside, the controls were more complicated than Zora had anticipated. But she wasn't one to give up easily. She sat down at the control panel, her fingers flying over the keys as she accessed the communication system. We don't have much time, one of her generals warned, his voice tense. Zora nodded, her focus never wavering. I know. I just need a few more minutes. Her heart raced as she worked, but she knew this was their only chance to take control of the situation. She needed to send a message that would shake the entire empire to its core, a message that would expose Kale's lies and show the people that they had a choice. They didn't have to follow him, and they could follow her instead. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Zora pressed the final key. The screen flickered to life, and her voice echoed throughout the entire empire. People of the Rixus Empire. Zora's voice rang clear and strong. I am Princess Zora, and I stand before you not as a ruler, but as a mother. I stand before you as someone who believes in the future we can build together. The rebellion led by my uncle, General Kale, is not for the people, it is for power. Kale is using fear to control us, to divide us. But I refuse to be controlled. I refuse to let fear decide our fate. Zora took a deep breath, her words powerful. This empire is built on unity, and together we can create a new future, one where we embrace change. One where we work together, not as enemies, but as equals. I ask you to stand with me. Stand with us. Let's build the future we deserve. The message ended, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence. Zora held her breath, waiting. Would the people listen? Would they stand with her? She turned to Ethan, her heart in her throat. Now we wait. The world outside was silent, but Zora knew that she had done all she could. The battle was far from over, but the seeds of change had been planted. Now, it was up to the people of the Rix's empire to decide if they would embrace that change.